This is Jarrod Horak. This is my latest Road to the 2023 Kentucky Derby points race recap video. Now, I do all these recap videos for the Oaks and Derby along with analysis videos, and you can check all of my Kentucky Derby and Kentucky Oaks points race videos for analysis and recaps on my YouTube channel each week. Now, let's get into the recaps of the races that I'm going to be doing, but quickly before I do that, if you're interested in my annual Triple Crown Series full cards, Kentucky Derby Day, Preakness, and Belmont Stakes Day for 2023, you'll find those full cards at therunawayhorse.com on my sales page. And right now I have a list of products that I'm covering, and you can go over and see which products I'm covering. And if you're interested in purchasing any of those, you'll be able to do that later this spring. Now let's get into the recaps, and I'm going to do the Louisiana Derby for March 25th. And the winner there was Kingsbarns for trainer Todd Pletcher. Now this race, if you looked at the overall composition of the race, it was at 1 mile and 3/16. We had 12 horses, and in that full field, there just wasn't a lot of speed. And I ended up picking Jace's Road on top because I thought maybe Jace's Road would go right to the front, but he wasn't able to get to the front there. The horse that was able to get to the front was Kingsbarns with jockey Flavien Prat aboard. He'd only run 2 times and he won both races, but he wasn't really a front runner. He was more of a positional, tactical speed type horse. But when no one else went to the lead, Flavien Prat was happy to get out there and control proceedings. And he had inside position on Jace's Road, so he had a better post. Jace's Road breaking from an outer post. Kingsbarns broke from a middle post. He was able to get to the early lead. And that in that controlled pace scenario, 24.71, 49.60, 114.69. So those were the fractions, and Kingsbarns was able to keep a clear lead, and he was able to kick away in the stretch. Jace's Road hung in there, but he couldn't go with him. And then you saw Disarm for trainer Steve Asmussen rally from off the pace, but he was no threat, and Kingsbarns was able to win by 4.5 lengths. A nice victory there. Or actually, he won by 3.5 lengths. He had a comfortable lead in the stretch. They cut into it by a length, but he still won by 3.5 lengths. He was 9-2 that day. Jace's Road Chase could not go with Disarm late, and Disarm was clearly second best. That was a decent effort, and then Jace's Road ended up third. The big disappointment of the race was Instant Coffee. He was 6th. He didn't pick up any Kentucky Derby points, and he really didn't get any pace help, but you would have liked him maybe to see him run a bit better in the late going. So looking at Kingsbarns for the Kentucky Derby, he's an unraced 2-year-old. He's only run 3 times, and he was able to completely control this race. I want to see what he can do in a 20-horse Derby field when he just doesn't get out there and have everything his own way. Now, Jace's Road's one that he does his best work on a fast track when he's able to get out there and set the pace himself, but he wasn't able to do that. So he's the kind of horse that if he does run in the Kentucky Derby and he can get out there and get to the front, he can be dangerous. Whereas a horse like Kingsbarns, he is much more versatile. He doesn't need the lead to be successful, and he still has a lot of upside with only those 3 starts. But an unraced 2-year-old, he's giving up a lot of experience to some of the other top 3-year-olds in the country. But he certainly has ability. He hasn't lost yet. Disarm is getting better for Steve Asmussen. He stepped up and ran a quality race here, and he could be getting good at the right time. It's just a question of, is he going to be good enough to step up? I think maybe later this year. He looks like that kind of horse. We'll have to see how it plays out. Louisiana Derby was a solid enough race. And then as for Instant Coffee, he's one, he needs pace help, and he's definitely at the mercy of the pace. And in a big, bulky field, if he runs in the Kentucky Derby, he could be maybe too far back early. The next race we'll look at is the UAE Derby. That was on March 25th at Meydan in Dubai. And a Japanese horse, or 2 Japanese horses, dominated this one. Derma Sotogake was the winner here. It was 1 mile and 3/16 at Meydan, and it was on the Dubai World Cup undercard. And Dura or Rede, those 2 dominated. They got out there. This was kind of a conveyor belt type race where the horses that were up on the pace just dominated this race. But Derma Sotogake, from a visual standpoint, looked very good. He was able to turn away Dura Aride, and he was able to win nicely. This race was relatively fast. If you look at the other runnings of the UAE Derby, the final time was 1:55.81. This was the fastest running since Mendelssohn in 2018 when he ran the mile in 3/16 in 1:55.18. So Derma Sotogake is supposed to come and run in the Kentucky Derby. And these Japanese shippers, they haven't done well, or any shippers out of this race actually in the UAE Derby have never really made an impact in the Kentucky Derby. But you would think if there's ever a year that it's going to happen, maybe this is the year, and maybe a Japanese shipper could make an impact, because they seem to be making an impact, especially Dubai World Cup Day, all around the world. Breeders' Cup Day, they've done well. These Japanese horses are well prepared. And I would expect that there's going to be a point where you're going to see one of these horses from the UAE Derby or a Japanese horse jump up and run well in the Kentucky Derby. Derma Sotogake, with that good speed that he has, it could fit into a race like the Kentucky Derby, especially in a year where we don't have a lot of horses running some fast speed ratings. So I would consider him a Kentucky Derby contender at this point. Let's see how he comes over and trains, and see how everything happens with the post positions and how the pace looks. But Derma Sotogake is one that I would consider. I wouldn't throw him right out of Kentucky Derby consideration for sure. Now, the Jeff Ruby Stakes on March 25th on all-weather ground at Turfway Park at 1 1/8 miles. This was a good effort from Two Phils. This was a fast race too. One of the faster Kentucky Derby points races. It's just it was run on all-weather ground, not on dirt. Now, Fantastic again set the pace. You saw Bluebirds over up on that pace. Major Jude was stalking. Wadsworth, My Value, Top Choice was up there. And then Two Phils was outside. He was racing wide from an outer post, and he was within striking distance throughout. He made a nice big wide run, and then he just took the lead, pulled clear, won by a very easy 5.5 lengths. Now, Jarrod Horak rode him. He was 5-2. That's his rider, and he rode him perfectly in this race. Now, Major Dude was a turf horse for Todd Pletcher, switching surfaces. He was clearly second best. Fantastic again. He ended up running third, and then Wadsworth, as I said, my top choice. He was within striking range, couldn't go with the top three. He ended up finishing fourth there. Final time, 1:49.03. Two Phils is one. He's won a couple Grade 3 races. He won the Street Scent Stakes in the Slop at Churchill Downs, and then he won this all-weather race. But he handles fast dirt as well, and you could throw him in the mix. I think he's a cut below some of the top Kentucky Derby contenders, but just based on this effort and his overall body of work in the stakes ranks, you can see him getting somewhere in the mix in the Kentucky Derby. Now, this one was a shocker, this last one, the Sunland Derby on March 26th. Wild on Ice, a local horse, upset the apple cart. Now, Fort Bragg was my top choice in the Sunland Derby, but I thought that the pace would be contested and he would set a good stalking trip. They decided to scratch and go to the Florida Derby instead, and the pace was quick in this race, just like it looked on paper. Hard to figure in Henry Q. The two favorites, they dueled on the lead. Wild on Ice, he was stalking in third, and then Low Expectations was right behind him. So those two were sitting behind that contested pace, and they made their move, and it came down to those two. But Wild on Ice was moving better in the stretch, and this was a big upset under jockey Ken Tohill. He ended up paying $72.80 for the win. So this was a huge upset. 151.39, not a particularly fast race. The winner wasn't a Triple Crown nominated at the time of his victory, but they put the money up to make him eligible for the Derby. Now we'll have to see if they go in that direction. I think it's going to be tough for him to repeat this effort. Huge Cinderella story here, but we've seen these New Mexico horses. Mind That Bird comes to mind, running in the Kentucky Derby and pulling off massive upsets. But I think if he's going to be at least, probably if he does run in the Kentucky Derby, at least 50-1 in that race. But if they decide to go, he's earned his spot. He's got enough points, and we'll have to see what they end up doing. So out of all of the horses that ran last week, I think still the most intriguing one is Derma Sotogake. I just was very impressed visually with his effort. And these Japanese horses, at some point, I would not be shocked if one of them jumped up and won the Kentucky Derby. He's interesting. Kingsbarns obviously has a lot of ability, but an unraced 2-year-old coming off a very easy trip in the Louisiana Derby when he was just handed an easy lead. And then Two Phils might be better on all-weather ground, but as I said, and then Wild on Ice. huge upset in that Sunland Derby. So that will wrap up the look at those points races that were run that weekend. I got a couple more points race videos coming up where I'm going to be looking at the Florida Derby and the Arkansas Derby, and then the Wood Memorial, the Bluegrass, and the Santa Anita Derby. All those major preps are still to come on the road to the Derby. And I'll be back with more recaps, more analysis videos. So keep checking my YouTube channel. And Triple Crown full cards coming up later this spring. And until I see you next time, good luck at the races.